Hey, it's Soleil, and this is episode 81 of the Orange Pill Investor. And today I want to talk about MicroStrategy executing a speculative attack and whether we can perform a speculative attack as well. And the short answer is I think not exactly, but maybe some kind of synthetic form of it, or maybe at least learn from it or model it. The short answer really is probably just you could just buy MicroStrategy and let him manage it for you. But Bitcoiners don't like third-party risk, so maybe a little bit more is required. So the way that I understand what they're doing is they're borrowing weak money. The borrowing itself causes more money to be created, so it's diluting the money, making it weaker, and then in the future they can pay that money back with weaker dollars. They're buying Bitcoin, which is harder money, and with inflation, that Bitcoin should appreciate faster than the weak money that they borrowed in the first place. So if I look at this from first principles, the way that I see it is they're incurring a liability, and then that liability becomes easier to manage because the means by which they're going to satisfy that liability becomes stronger. And it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or it just kind of starts to snowball. And of course, I sell covered calls, so immediately I thought, how does this fit into my own personal biases, and how can I twist this to make it fit into my frame and how I see things. And so the first step is somebody has to loan you the money, or you have to incur some kind of liability that you have to pay back. And that's the way that I see selling a covered call, because you are selling the other party the right, but not the obligation, to call away your shares. And so it's almost kind of, instead of just borrowing the money and saying, okay, you're going to get a fixed interest rate, I'm kind of borrowing the money, and I only have to pay it back if the price goes up. And it doesn't just have to go up a little, it has to go up above the strike price that we set. But not only does it have to go above the strike price, it has to go above the strike price plus the money that I was already paid, or it's a wash for the other party. Now, it definitely can benefit the other person, because on my MicroStrategy shares, I probably would have tripled. I had shares when it was like 600, and I would have tripled up. And I made less than half of that, I think, because I was making like 10% in premium over the past month, but it went up, what was that, 68%. So I ended up at least 2 out of the 4 weeks. One week I was able to roll for a credit, but 2 of the 4 weeks I had to roll for a huge debit, 2 huge debits. But I did not want to lose my MicroStrategy shares. I want to continue selling covered calls against them basically forever. So it's almost kind of like I'm pretending I'm retired already, and I'm just selling covered calls against them. Now, it's pretty dangerous with how volatile it is, but let's just go through the 3 scenarios. And I'll probably take a little bit of a tangent here, because I had it kind of blew my mind. I was talking to a guy in the sauna yesterday, and he I guess he did some boxing, and he was talking about boxing. Now there's three types of boxers. There's the chargers, who are the really very offensive people. There's the, I guess we call them defenders, or maybe they were defenders. And then there's the retreaters, the ones who are always kind of backpedaling and they're always kind of on their heels. And I was like, I let him finish his story, and I was like, dude, that kind of blew my mind, because that's exactly how the stock market is. The stock market is boxing. And it just totally makes sense when people talk about the stock market being more about game theory than some of this other stuff. But a stock can do three things. It can either trade sideways, which is, the balanced boxer, or it can pump, which would be the charger, or it can go down, which would be the retreater. And so I just thought that was interesting as hell. But let's look at those three scenarios. So if you sell a covered call and you collect, I collected way more than, I probably collected 3.5%. So like $7,000, and I think this was 18 and 1900 at the 2100 strike. So 200 plus 1900 would give me the 2100. So yeah, I baked in at least a 10% call away value. So in the event that MicroStrategy trades sideways, then I collect and keep the full $7,000. If MicroStrategy goes down, and actually let me start over a little bit. So my basic assumption is that MicroStrategy will on average go up. Otherwise I wouldn't hold it in the first place. So that's my basic assumption, and I should start with there. That doesn't mean it's going to go up every week without fail. It's going to go up some, it's going to go down some. And as we can see, sometimes it goes up very violently, and then it can come down just as violently. If we scroll way out, we can see this when it hit $1,000, and then a couple months later, it's got cut in half. But it can go down a little, or it can go down a lot. But in the trade sideways or in the go down scenarios, you get to keep the whole profit. You roll it for a couple of bucks, because it's just going to expire worthless for the other guy. In the event that it goes up, if it goes up just a little, anywhere up to your strike, then you still get to keep it all. If it goes up past your strike and it costs you $7,000 to roll it, then you would have broken even, but you still get all of the value. You didn't lose anything at all. And the only time that you're going to technically incur a loss, and that's with ironical quotes in the air, because you're still benefiting all the way from 1900 to 2100. You're just, if you wanted to keep those shares, you'd have to pay a debit to roll them. So if you're putting that into your spreadsheet, that does count as a loss, because you're going to buy it back for more than you sold it for. However, if you look at your total account value, it definitely went up. It went up the 10% on your 100 shares, and then it actually went up however far it went up past your strike, but then, of course, you're going to have to pay to retain the shares. Or you can let them get called away, and then you just have a bunch of cash sitting in your account. But saying, oh, it went above my strike and I took a loss doesn't really make sense, because you definitely made a bunch of money. So how would this be kind of looked at as a speculative attack? Because you're incurring a liability. That person's going to give you cash for that. So when I sold that covered call against my shares, I ended up with an extra $7,000. Well, I can immediately take that $7,000 and buy 3 more shares, 3.5 more shares of MicroStrategy. So now, if my assumption is that MicroStrategy is going to go up, even if it goes over my strike, I'm still long 10% to my 2100 strike, and now I'm 3 shares long unlimited. Now those 3 shares isn't going to save me from a move to like 2300 because that's an extra $200 times 100 is going to be, that's an extra 20 grand, and those 3 shares are only going to go up, that we can sell them for like 7 grand. So, but it does kind of take the sting out of having to roll it if you can sell those 3 shares at a profit. But the other thing that it kind of does is selling a covered call just in general, it ensures that you are always selling high. If it clears your strike, you're mechanically choosing to sell high instead of trying to guess the top and having this emotional element to your trade. But let's just take a look at this. The numbers have changed a little bit. But for 2100 strike, there's about an 87% chance of profit, and this is just their algorithm, generating a number here. And it's going to be roughly, ballparking the delta. This is an approximate chance of success. So the delta is almost 0.2. So you can kind of predict on average that 20% of the time this will exceed your strike, and 80% of the time this will expire worthless for the other person. And this has already dropped down in price because MicroStrategy collapsed a couple $100. So on Friday when I sold it, it was worth 7. So I could actually close this for half the money at this point. But let's just say we were making this trade now. That's still almost 2%, 1.5%. And you buy an extra share of MicroStrategy. So 4 out of 5 times, this will expire worthless for the other guy. So that means after 4 weeks, you could have 4 shares. And then on the 5th week, it exceeds this 2100 strike. And you make an extra 10% on the callaway value, plus however high it goes past your strike. But how far is it going to go past the 2100 strike? I got way more conservative after kind of getting my ass kicked. So just over, so let's see, February 23rd, let's go to a week later. So that went up 50% in a week. Whew. 23rd, 7 days would be March 1st. Yeah. That's, not quite 50%. Because that's almost 7. That would be 10. Oh, okay, wait a minute. That doubled. That's 100% in a week. No, I'm sorry. So that is pretty brutal. So if that went up 50% in a week from 1700 to 2500, that's going to cost you 1700 to 2500. Yeah, so if that ends up costing you $800 a share, 80 grand to roll it, and you only have 4 shares of MicroStrategy, that's kind of scary. So while it's technically possible, I don't know. Oh man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep this up, selling covered calls against MicroStrategy. This is crazy. Which is why I have an extra 50 shares of it that are unlimited upside. But still, that's that's pretty rare. So, I mean, over all of this time, I guess I'd have to look at it more and see how many shares can you collect going down and then this like slow climb to here before it rockets. So, you know, over all of this time, so this is over a year. March 30th, 2023. So from March to February, that's 11 months. If you collect 44 weeks at 1%, then you got an extra 44 shares. You got 144 shares of MicroStrategy when it goes here. And then when it goes up to 1,000 in a week, and you got to come up with the 50 grand, then you've got 50 shares that are now worth $1,000 each. So maybe it's kind of a wash. When I first started studying covered calls, they always said, "Oh, you want to trade something that goes sideways," and I kind of always didn't like that. I mean, you always want it to go up at least a little bit. You want it to go up to your strike price. But something is this volatile, it does make it very difficult to trade, because especially when you get here and then it whipsaws back down to here, and then let's say you sell the 1600 strike and then it goes to 1900, it can shake it like a rag doll sometimes. But the other part of the speculative attack that I was thinking about is that due to inflation itself, you are incurring this obligation, and then it's going to be a tiny bit of inflation creep in 1 week, but you're going to do it every week for a year. So the entire year of inflation does kick in. You're just taking them in weekly chunks. So you're incurring this liability. They're paying you, and then a week later, you may or may not have to satisfy that liability. And even if you do, dollars is worth less. Now, granted, the money that you're going to have to pay them is denominated in the asset that's increasing, but then the extra shares that you use to purchase it would offset that somewhat. The only other thing that I could think of, that I thought about, and I did pick up a few really just way out of the money cheap leaps, would be just taking, buying that, selling that premium, and then YOLOing that premium into long calls, just buying long calls instead of straight shares. But I'm an options seller. I'm a premium hunter. I don't really buy options as a main part of my strategy. So I'd have to take a look at what it would look like if I sold a 2100 strike. And then bought way out of the money. And let's customize this. Like, how many way out of the money calls would it take? Is that going to change this graph any? Yeah. So if the price of MicroStrategy went over, oh God, $4,000, that's when those would start to take over. It just changed my 10 to a 9. So can I not even go? No, the max is 9. That doesn't make sense. I wonder if that's It was doing that to me last week, and I thought maybe there was an issue with that. Can I really not buy more than 10 or more than 9? Yeah, so I don't know if you'd end up having to buy like, so 10 of these cost you $350. Like 100 of these might cost you $3,500. So I guess you could keep a little bit of premium in your pocket. But to me, just buying calls for the most part, especially these 1 week calls, is just gambling. It's just degenerate gambling. So that's why I generally don't do it. That's frustrating. I'm gonna have to find another tool to see if I can model that graph out. Usually I really appreciate Robinhood's graphs over here. I appreciate Robinhood's user interface just in general. It's very simple for new users. And when they added these graphs, it was just really amazing, I thought. But, so is a speculative attack possible for us as just retail investors? I mean, you could just go out and borrow the money, I suppose, but that could be a recipe for disaster, because it's all good when MicroStrategy's doing this, but when it's doing this to this, you can get completely wrecked. So I was when I thought about this idea, and I was like, okay, I got to take a look at this, I was way more optimistic about being able to make it work. But this is starting to scare me a little bit. Another 100% move in a very short period of time. I got to really be careful with this. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm as prepared for a 100% move as I thought I was. So I may have to really make sure that I mean, I think I'm all right now because I have the 50 extra shares that have unlimited upside. But yeah, I think that just makes it even more important that I have to stack more shares. 100% of the premium that I sell has to go to shares every week, period. All right. Well, that was a good thought experience for me, and that's going to inform my trading as I go forward. And I'll just take a quick note about the 5K small account challenge. Finally got to break even a little, like 1% to the good. So happy about that. And I need to update the spreadsheet to include, what are these two that I added? I gotta know. I gotta go back and look at my trade history. But I did cover those in a video earlier in the week. So there was a favorable response to the video I did yesterday. So I guess it's going to be nonstop MicroStrategy until people stop watching. So, all right, that's good. That'll do it for now. Be good, y'all.